and opens the game with d4. Rapport instantly shoots out his move, knight f6. And what is Vidit going to play now is the question. He goes knight to f3. After having qualified to the candidates, winning the FIDE Grand Swiss, it will be interesting to see how Vidit fares against some of the best players in the world at the Gashimov Memorial. c6 played by Rapport, slightly weird move. He is looking for perhaps a setup of Slav, which he will play most likely with d5. No, b5. Whoa, what a move this is. b5. Hardly ever you see at top level chess. Vidit takes it, CB, and the reason why this move is not so good, if you think about it, is that after takes, you're captured away from the center. So in a way, you can see that white center control is more. And now Rapport moves the piece again in the opening. So he's kind of breaking several opening rules. And it remains to be seen if Vidit will punish him. Bishop h4 played. And now the bishop takes the long diagonal here. Richard Rapport loves to play creative chess. And that is exactly what he's doing. He gives a check here. Now, with this check and the knight looking here, you cannot interpose with the queen. So you will have to move your knight. That is exactly what Vidit does. And he's asking Rapport that exactly what's your idea? e6 is his idea. He wants to pin it further with bishop coming here. And also now e6 is possible because the queen has moved here and the bishop no longer attacks it. So a3 played by Vidit, stopping bishop to b4. 12 minutes 56 seconds for Vidit, while 15 minutes for Rapport. And when Rapport starts to blitz out his moves, sometimes he comes up with very strong moves, but sometimes he even goes wrong. We'll see what happens today right now. Vidit can take with the queen, but he decides to take with the knight, and it is maybe one of the more ambitious decisions here, because you want to quickly get out your bishop and castle. Of course, you have to keep in mind that your g2 pawn is hanging. Knight a6, again developing towards the side of the board. Richard Rapport is playing with fire here, but maybe he has some ambitious plans in his mind. First, Vidit blunts the bishop here with his pawn moving up to f3, and next he would like to develop the bishop and quickly castle it out. Rapport goes bishop to d6. Well, you know, with Richard, you can guess none of his moves. They are all so creative and so original. But now if you see, this pawn is slightly weak. So Vidit can actually continue bishop d3, and as we discussed, continue normally with castles. That's exactly what he does. And Rapport castles it out here. And I believe Vidit will also castle it out, because that seems like the most logical thing to do. And yes, he also castles. Now the knight is no longer pinned, so it can move. He goes f5, stopping the white central mass from expanding. But can Vidit play a4? What a classy move that would be. Because then you are provoking him either to take or push. And in both cases, you get the c4 square to attack the queen and the bishop. So that is a fantastic choice. But he goes queen e2. I believe that to a4, maybe Vidit did not like something. Maybe knight b4 is what he didn't like. So he first goes queen e2 and he attacks the pawn on b5. And let's see what Rapport does. He needs to defend this pawn. He has got quite an uncomfortable position out of the opening. We must agree. Vidit's moves have been simple, logical and strong. Now the knight goes to c7 and defends the pawn. But if you notice, now the knight can no longer jump forward. So it makes all the more sense to play a4, and that's exactly what Vidit does. Fantastic positional play. You can see Vidit is tremendously focused because he knows that he has an advantage. And if you have been a Vidit fan, or if you followed his chess, you know that many times Vidit gets great positions against strong players but hasn't converted them in the past. But has Grand Swiss changed anything? Has Vidit become more confident? Remains to be seen. Knight to d5. Now the knight is looking at this pawn and also looking at this square. So it's a pawn sacrifice that Rapport has done, because he did not like the move b4, giving away the c4 square. But isn't this a free pawn? Can you not take with the bishop? Can you not take it also with the pawn? He takes with the pawn, attacking the queen. The queen goes back, and now notice how the queen and the bishop are hitting here, so you can play h3. That's a simple move there that Vidit can go for, but he has 6 minutes 43 seconds to figure it out. Nice solid advantage for Vidit. He can play either h3 or he can push his pawn to f4, blocking these pieces. And what is he going to do? He can even also play, well, bishop g3 would lose back the pawn. So he goes f4. And now Rapport can try, yes, rook fc8, taking control of the open c file. That's his idea. How does Vidit continue next? I think it's a very ingenious pawn sacrifice here by Richard Rapport, because if you look at it, his bishop is well posted, his knight is now securely stationed. Vidit goes king h1 and just moves his king to the side of the board. A good move for Rapport now is knight b4, or just drop the bishop back to f8. He can even play h6. Many options, but it seems like Rapport has seen something. Maybe a tactic. Is he going to sacrifice something here? Oh, look at his hand. He sacks on f4. Bishop takes f4. That's a blunder. But his idea is very clear. He wants to take here. Knight takes f4 and then unleash the bishop here. Vidit simply takes it quickly. Knight f4 attacking the queen and here. And let's imagine if you move the queen away, then knight takes g2, attacks this and the queen, and the bishop is unleashed. Whoa! That's a very dangerous move, but bishop g3 counter pinning here. What a move by Vidit Gujrathi. If you take the queen, I take your queen here. And has Richard Rapport simply missed it? Knight e2 played, bishop takes c7, and if you count the pieces, Vidit has 3, Rapport has 2, and it takes one of them, but Vidit takes back another. He's simply a piece up. Richard Rapport has blundered big time, or has he? Because now he attacks here and here, also the b2 pawn. Is there some compensation? Has Vidit got to play bishop rook d1? No, he plays bishop f3. What a super move, because if you take the knight, I take the bishop. If you take my bishop, I take your bishop with my knight. That is just amazing chess. He defends it. And now again, the knight has to move, but look at Vidit's confidence. He is playing this so well. He's playing this phenomenally well, and I think this is one of the things which we need to observe in Vidit's play, is the conversion. Of course, this position is a very easily winning position, clear piece up, but still, the way in which he would convert this is, I guess, much better than before. Rook takes b2, attacking the knight and the pawn here. So the knight has to move. He goes knight to c5. If you take the pawn on b5, I'm going to take the pawn on d7. And that's the idea. So he goes d6, attacking the knight. And now the knight has to move. But where exactly should you go? There's knight e6, the bishop controls it. And these little tricky decisions have to be navigated carefully. Otherwise, you can land up in a difficult position. There is also knight d7 move. Because if you go rook takes b5, I have rook a8 pinning the bishop here. That is a possibility. Let's see what Vidit does here. He's down to 30 seconds on the clock. You can see that he has some difficulties converting it, but maybe Rapport might get some chance here. But I think Vidit is being just very careful. He goes knight a6. And Rapport takes the pawn with his rook. And Vidit goes knight to c7. I love this move. Knight c7, hitting the rook and the pawn. And I think just keeping all his pieces nicely positioned. He has a 10-second increment in hand, so he's not going to lose on time. But he has to be careful about the time factor in the game. h3 just taking away all the back rank issues. White has an extra piece, that is the knight, but black has 2 pawns for it. So the conversion might not be trivial, but it's definitely not so tough as well. I'm sure Vidit can manage it. Rook b6 played. What's next now? Where is your play coming from as white? I believe the play lies on the e6 pawn. Exactly. Rook e1. The knight now attacks this pawn, and if one more pawn falls for black, then it's just game over. h6 played. Is there some trick here? Because if you take here, rook b1 is the idea. So he goes king h2, and now d5 played. The rook defends the pawn. Now the bishop defends here. So with it down to 10 seconds, 8, 7, plays rook to c1. He has to remain calm and careful here, not to let his time run down. That's the only way he can lose this position, I feel. Otherwise, he's just very securely placed. Goes king f8. Okay. What's next? Maybe rook e1 again. He goes back to the center of the board. If you come king e7, there is knight d5 check with a pin there. So rook comes to c6, attacking the knight. And now the bishop comes to h5. Very, very sly move, because if threat is to take and checkmate here with the rook. So rook goes to d6, defending against it. Richard Rapport actually defending very hard and giving Vidit a tough time to win. Rook c1 played here. Again, bringing the rook on the c file. Vidit looking for a way to break through, which is not easy. But he finds it. Knight e8. Fantastic move. Now this is hanging. Also rook f7 check threatened, and the other rook is going to come in with rook to c7. So rook b7 played. And I'm sure that there are many different ways to win. Vidit chooses to take. Bishop takes. And now rook to c7. So all his pieces working together like a charm. Very nice. And Richard Rapport goes g6, giving back one pawn. But I think that's just desperation. And you can see Vidit now very careful. He knows that he has less time, but he also knows that he's completely winning. The bishop is attacked by the rook, so careful there. Rook check. And if the king moves away to g8, then knight f6 is game over.